All right, everybody, welcome to Auth Part 2, Electric Boogaloo. So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to verify users' identities in Rails. You should be able to issue signed tokens to users, and you should be able to differentiate between authorization and authentication, because they're not the same thing. But first, let's make sure we got this first part down. So I want you to set up everything in a new Rails project to create new users in Rails. As a recap, you need to get bcrypt going, you need to create a route to create a user, you need to create a controller to create a user, you need to create a user model with has secure password on it. Any questions about this process?
What do you want to call it?
Let's pick a new noun for today. Lamps. All right. Lamps plus.
Excellent.
So put a couple minutes on the clock. Get cracking, America. I screwed up and didn't do the dash dash API, so if you did the same,
I did that yesterday, it took so long.
it sucks. Yeah. Cool. Give me a fist of 5 on how far you got through this. 5 means you got it. Fist means what are we doing?
Somewhere here.
All right. Oh, hang on, slow down, slow down. Back over here. Okay, let me see your users. Let me see your model. Let me see your migration. Okay, dope. Let me see your error again. Lamps. Nope. What are you making? Are you creating a new lamp? A new user. There we go. Oh my god.
Well, at least I need to set it all up. So we can figure out a postman, motherfucker.
Beautiful. Good shot. Okay, let me see your controller. Thank you. Okay. Turn around. Beautiful. All right. So, we didn't lose it all yesterday. Yeah.
What does the $2A, $12 mean again? Why does it always start with that?
So this $2A is the version of the algorithm that's being used, and then 12 is the cost. And then the first part of this is the salt, and the rest of it is the hash. All right, so we're successfully creating users, bangarang. And we're storing the hashed passwords. We don't store plain text passwords. How are we going to achieve our goal of finding out whether or not somebody is who they say they are?
Ask them to sign in.
Ask them to sign in. They give us their username and password. What do we do with that?
Compare it to what we have.
Yep. Well, but we didn't store their password.
We store their hash.
So we hash it as well, compare the hashes. Now, luckily in Rails, it's actually all built in for us. So let's look at some steps. We're going to create a login route. We're going to create a login controller and action. We're going to look up a user based on their username. We're going to authenticate them, and let's get that far. That's our first objective. Just find out if somebody is who they say they are. So, just like yesterday, I want you to watch me, and here's how we're going to do this. I'm going to save here, so I'm going to git add all. I'm going to git commit m, adding users, like that. That's it. So everybody do that also. Git add all, capital A, and then make a commit. Because we want to be able to jump back to this spot.
What's the difference between add all and add period?
Period is from the current folder I'm in, and I think it doesn't take care of deletes. If you do -A, you can do that from any folder in the project, and it'll add every change for the entire repo, as well as deletes.
That's good.
I still do git add dot sometimes also, but there's a difference between them. What?
Sorry, what did you write?
Adding users. Cool. So watch me do this, and then we're going to do it together. Then you're going to do it on your own, just like we did yesterday. So you don't need to push it anywhere. We'll just keep it as a save point that we can roll back to. It's in there. Awesome. So we are, first step was create a login route. Easy. So I'm going to go over here, and then in routes, we're going to do just post, and then login, and that goes to authentication login. This is a different format than the one above. It's in the labs, but if you've forgotten, all resources is a shortcut for this with all 5 or 7 of the different routes that we have, where it's matching the method and the path to a controller and an action. If we follow the conventions, we can just use resources, but this is kind of a different sort of thing. We're not actually really creating a resource. We are performing an action though. So we're going to make this authentication controller, so we've routed correctly. We're going to make a Rails G controller, and this one will be authentication. And if I look in that authentication controller, I need a login action. And this is a little bit different too, because it's not a CRUD action, right? It's not create, it's not destroy, it's not any of those. We can make our own actions also, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So we've made the controller and the action. We need to look up the user. How am I going to get the user? Find?
Find users.
Yep. So if I do something like user.find, What is find expecting? An ID. I don't know my ID. I didn't send you an ID. So what do I do? What do I do instead?
Find by username.
Yep. Find by username. And then where does that come in? Params. Username. Cool. Cool. So I find the user and then I authenticate them. So there's two things that can go wrong in a login. You give me a username that doesn't exist, or you give me a password that doesn't work for that user. How do you think I do the first one?
Validation?
Not validation. Easier than that.
Oh, if it's true.
Yeah. So if not user, then render JSON, and then we'll just give it a hash. It's like error invalid username. Cool. So if there's no matching user for this, that's what we expect to see. Neat. Otherwise, we assume that there is a user. So to validate them, a user.authenticate, and then params password. Authenticate is a magic built-in method that we got because we're using has secure password. Because that's on the user model, every instance of user gets an authenticate method. And we can also put that in an if block. So we can say if user authenticate whatever, then we might say render JSON. We'll say something like how lame would that app be if that's all it did? You remembered your password. So if they authenticate correctly, we get that. If they don't, we get that. So that's authenticating a user. Let's see if it works. So my username is Kyle. My password is Kyle. This time I am posting to /login, but I'm sending it the same stuff. Correct password. If my password was Kyler, wrong password.
Wouldn't have.
That's easy.
Quick question.
Yep.
You use the post because on the routes you have it as post, correct?
Mm-hmm. And this is not a RESTful resource. We're not making something. We're not deleting something. We're not really getting something. Login is a completely different kind of API architecture that's technically called RPC. Actually, I'm going to put that back over by this. RPC stands for Remote Procedure Call. It's basically just calling a function on somebody else's computer. But it's not, it doesn't have that same kind of like standard shape to it that REST does. And post is generally anytime you're sending something with RPC. Get is anytime you're getting something with RPC. The more practical reason why we would use post for this is if you send a get request can't have a body, and that's where we want to send the username and password. We could also send it in the query string, but funny story, if it's in your query string, then like anybody can see it, including your router, your ISP, any of that kind of stuff. They need to know where to send the request. You can encrypt the body of a request, but you can't encrypt the destination. Like somebody's got to know where to send this fucking thing. Also, if somebody like snoops that, you're just making everything so much easier for them because now they can share that URL around with people. Your URL has your username and password in it. Dope. Easy way to log in is me. All right. So I've made a login route, login controller in action. We looked up a user and we authenticated them. Questions about that process so far? Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to git stash this. Actually, first I'm going to close all these windows. Neat. It still has the files there. RM app, controllers, authentication controller. I'll get rid of the test for that too. All right, right back where I was. You guys talk me through it now. Just like yesterday, Adam, give me first step.
Go to your routes and make a below do post login in quotes, comma 2 colon authentication controller login hash login.
Good. Awesome, Mez, what am I doing next?
You're gonna make a login method in your controller.
And which controller?
Sorry, the user.
Ooh.
Nope, sorry.
So this says, I want this controller, I want this action on it.
Yeah, so you need to create an authentication controller.
Beautiful. Rails G controller authentication. All right, it is so. Stacy, what's next?
Go to your controller and find the lamp, or the, oh, sorry, mine spelled lamp. Find the name.
How? Where?
And find, so, oh, sorry, in login. Do, make a login, method.
Cool.
First you need to find the name.
Okay, how do I do that?
User.find by, name, what do you call it?
Mm-hmm.
Grams.
Outstanding. Samantha, what's next?
So if the user doesn't exist,
Mm-hmm.
you want to render JSON error,
Sure.
letting them know the incorrect user name.
Awesome. How do I do that?
If, and then in parentheses, the exclamation point, user.
Well, the parentheses are always optional. I think Ruby people in general don't like them if they don't have to use them. Even this, they probably, I'd get barked at for by someone. But whatever, JavaScript at heart always. Cool, so if not user, what do I do?
Render JSON, and then an error message.
Yeah. Oh, pro tip on this. So we can say incorrect username. We also might want to give it a status because an incorrect username in this case still renders at 200. So if we want to do something a little bit more meaningful, I'm spacing on this, but I think it's just status. It's another thing on this. That would be status unauthorized. And if the syntax of that is looking kind of fucked up, let's rewrite this like it were JavaScript. Might be a little easier. Oops, and it also will help me, nope, never mind. I was gonna say it was gonna help me catch that error. So if we were writing that as JavaScript, it would probably look something like that. Render takes in a hash, which has 2 keys in this case. JSON is itself a hash, so we can just send it whatever we want. That's what's going to get JSONified. And then we can also send it a status. 90% sure that's how you do it. We'll see. Cool. Seth, what am I doing next? So we're handling the case where it's not the right user. What if it is the right user?
If it is the right user, then to say if user authenticates brand's password, render JSON message.
Sure. Cool. And then Toby, what if it's not the right password?
You want to send back, so else, render JSON message. Didn't do it. Or error, you didn't do it. With a status.
I like it. Cool. Let's see if it works. Cool. The right username says you did it. I get a 200. If I send the wrong password, I get a 401 unauthorized and an error. If I get the password right but the username wrong, yep. Oh, I see why. Can anybody else debug this with me? So it says undefined method authenticates for nil class. Because I sent the wrong username. Why did that happen?
Do we need to capitalize user?
Nope. All the logic on this is right. It's kind of a quirky Rails thing. Okay, so let's trace the code on what I just did. Pass in the wrong username. So I'm setting user equal to user find by the user that doesn't exist. So this ends up being nothing. Okay, if that's nothing, then render this. Then what happens?
Should you be rendering user instead of JSON? Or wait,
No, all of this is right up to here. Then what happens?
You can just send it somewhere, like.
And then it ends the def.
You need to
Right.
return
Oop. Does it end the def or does it
Ends
end
the-
the if?
Yeah,
So then what happens?
then just goes to the authenticate.
Cool. So I have nothing here and I'm calling authenticate on it.
Right.
Womp womp. So I need to tuck all this inside of an else block. Like that. And now, incorrect username. You did it. You didn't. You didn't it. Cool. That is verifying who user is in Rails. Questions? Yeah.
The errors that we're sending back, those are not the errors that are gonna like show up for the user, right? Those are just the ones we see.
It's up to them. So if I send back that error message, a couple different ways your client can handle this. The browser sees this status and then comes up with its own thing. Or the browser goes, I don't know, whatever the server said, and just displays that. But that's up to the browser, or up to your browser application to choose how it wants to handle that. Other questions? Cool, your turn. So, put some time on the clock. If you were typing along or anything, if you type, let's see, close all these. If you type get stash, and then a get status, you might need to just delete these. App controllers, authentication controller, test controllers, authentication controller test, and then we're back where we were. Couple minutes, see if you can do this on your own. Throw up a hand if you get stuck.
Sorry, get stash and then what?
And then take a look at git status and see what files it didn't delete. So I did git stash and then git status, and then I looked at any files that were still there, and then I just RM'd them.
If you could type in all those files, could you?
There should only be 2 of them.
Yeah, got it.
Yes.
Can you write the status again? Just the.
I already blew it out. It's at the same level as JSON, and it's status. And then the thing that you're assigning it to is the symbol unauthorized.
Okay, so it's status.
So it ends up kind of looking like
That's what I have wrong. Okay. But it's unauthorized.
unauthorized, yeah. Cool. What questions came up while you're working on that?
So, obviously Rails, like you said, it does a lot of this for us with the user authentication. But I know like a lot of people are doing like Node, which
Sure.
requires you to do it manually.
Correct. So let's take a look at how it works in Node. This is not super different. So I have a login controller. I get the, let's see, what is get password hash? Wow, that's really just get user. All right. Get user by username. Stupid. All right. So I'm getting a user by their username, and then with that user, I'm doing bcrypts compare. Bcrypt is it's just like a gem. It's an npm package that I brought in. Compare is exactly like authenticate. It's just not on the user model. What it does is it takes your password digest, the thing you saved, and the thing that you passed in, and compares them. If that's true, or if it's not true, we throw an error. If it is true, then I delete the password digest off the thing that I got back, and then sign a token and send it, which is actually identical in Node and Rails. Steps are the same. Other questions? Yeah, Miss.
Is there a good tutorial, step-by-step thing for the Node stuff that you like?
One of the videos where we did it, probably. Mostly online ones. IMO kind of suck.
Finding that
Yeah. Well, and so much of them are like by these old Java developers who are like, this language sucks. Let me fix it. She ended up writing like the worst node I've ever seen. Other questions? Cool. So that's objective one.
Wait, I do.
Yeah.
Why don't we say status success to anything?
Because that's the default.
Oh.
When we create something like in our users controller, it'd probably be better off doing something like status created, so we get a 201 instead of a 200. I'd be down with that. Okay, so I just realized I blew out my implementation of this, so I'm going to put it back real quick. You're going to see it one more time, and then we're going to do tokens. So post to login goes to authentication login. Dope. So I Rails G controller authentication. And then I go into my auth controller, def login. User is user find by. Username is params. Username, if not user, render JSON. We could even just do something like render status directly. That's fine. Elsewise, if user.authenticate, then we pass in params password. Then if they do want to render JSON for my failure message, I was going to do depart from me because you never knew me. Church joke. So, all right. If I did that right. Kyler, is it unauthorized? It's unauthorized. Kyle, did it. Kyler, unauthorized. All right, we're in business. So, with your working solution, let's make another commit. So, we're going to take a look at what we changed. Awesome. Git add all, git commit, verifies identity. All right, dope. So our next objective is issuing signed tokens to users. So let's talk about why we're doing this one. So I can verify who somebody is if I have their username and password. So if I wanted to like protect resources with this, like we're going to do in lesson 3, I need to get the username and password every fucking time. Well, that's not good. What if there was like an ID card or something that I could give somebody that I'm issuing and I can verify its authenticity and it proves who you are. If you have this thing, then I believe you are who you say you are. That thing is called a token. So it takes the place of a username and password. What's also cool about it is we can store anything we want on these tokens also. We can just store arbitrary data. And so a lot of times that might be like, I don't know, your shopping cart or something that like wouldn't necessarily get saved in the database, but is a part of like your logged in user. For right now though, we're just going to focus on identity. We're going to have a token that proves who somebody is. So we do that with a package called JWT. And then we are going to encode a message with JWT using a built-in secret key that Rails gives us. So just like before, watch me, then we'll do it together, then you do it on your own. So I'm going to let's do bundle add JWT. And like, yes, it's pronounced that way. I didn't fucking make it up. JWT is pronounced jot. All right, so jot's in there now. Now we have a class available to us called JWT in capitals. So we're going to JWT.encodes, class method of the jot class. And encode takes two things. It takes a hash. This is the thing we're going to put in the token. And then it takes in something that we're going to sign this token with. So this is usually some kind of secret password kind of thing. But it's not the user's secret password, it's the application's secret password. This is the keys of the castle. So how about we say, let's start with just doing the whole user. Why not? So we're going to encode the user. Actually, I'm curious if it'll let me do that. We'll see. And the baked-in secret key that we have is Rails application secrets secret key base and the first thing on it. So it looks like this.
That's in the YAML file, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll say secret key equals rails.application.secrets secret key, like that. We'll pass that in over here. And then instead of rendering this message, save that as a token. And that should do her. Let's see. Still curious if it'll let me do the entire object. Undefined method, no, for no. Oh, I need to restart my server. Because I added a new gem. Still. Yep, hang on. That's not where it's yelling at me. It's yelling at me on line 9, which is this. Really? Secret key base. Yes, good call. That saved us a couple minutes. There we go. Awesome. This thing that I got back is called a JWT. And I don't like how it looks right now. So I'm going to say that it's like that. I like that better. Ah, come on, man. All right, so when I log in, I get this token back. So this token is encoded. It's uncrypted. This is base 64 encoded. Any guesses what base 64 is all about? Base 10 is like our counting system. Base 2 is binary. What's base 64? No, super good guess. That's 32 and 64 bit. That's like how large each little like piece of data that the computer works with is. Base 64. Any guesses there?
So kind of exponentials of 64. One is 64 to the first power, 2 is 64 to the squared, etc.
Yes. So really, we're talking about density of information that we can store in like each unit. Binary, not that much. All we can say is on or off. Versus a like base 10 number, 0 through 9, where we can store 10 different things in one character. Base 64 is all the lowercase letters, all the uppercase letters, 0 through 9, and like I think underscore and stash and slash or something like that. We can do all of those things in one character. So when we're base 64 encoding something, we are basically just very densely storing some information. So if we were like representing binary, ones and zeros, and we base 64 encode it, it gets way smaller because we can store so much denser shit in it. But it's encoded, not encrypted, because anybody who has this JWT can see what's inside it. It's not hard. In fact, if you go to JWT IO, the JWT website, we can just paste it in here and see what's in it. Oop, that's not what a JWT looks like.
You encoded it.
There we go. All right. Ah, I was worried about that. Look what it encoded. The memory address on my computer of that fucking thing. All right. I was worried I wouldn't be able to get away with that. So instead of passing in the user object, pass in a hash that has like something like user ID is user.id, and then maybe like username is user.username. All right, let's see how that one looks. There we go. Look. User ID 1, username Kyle. Dope. So anybody that has this token, that's me. That's my ID card. You got my ID, and we're not very good at like matching faces. So how, my question to you, I mean, I could just change this to Mez. Aren't I Mez now? How does it know that I didn't fuck with this to impersonate somebody else?
Your signature?
Yeah, what's the signature?
That secret key encoded?
Kinda. It's used to encode it. You have to have it to generate that signature or that hash. So we take the header and the payload and we hash it using like my special secret key, and it generates a signature. In fact, if we look at the token that we got back, you see these dots here? First part of this is the header. Second part of this is the body. Last part of this is the signature. So what they do is they add these two things together and hash them and see if it turns into this. If I fuck with it and try to like make a different jot of it, I can't recreate that hash. And so it knows whether or not it was tampered with. It's a super elegant system. Yeah. Yeah. All it did, installed Jot, grabbed the secret key, encoded a token, and sent it. Questions? Yeah.
I guess I'm kind of stuck on, obviously the way that you did this and here is
Mhm.
that you had to authenticate the password first. But if you're using can you use the token in place of the user, or does it have to be together?
So nothing in this changes. This is like the final version of login.
Okay.
Using that token to like protect a resource, that's lesson 3.
Okay.
But like you can't protect the login action, otherwise nobody could log in because they'd have to be logged in to do it.
So can't like I take someone else's jot and be like, this is my jot now?
Exactly. You very much can. So that's a reason why you want to use HTTPS. That's a reason why like you don't want to like stay logged into public computers, that kind of shit. Because like that is exactly the kind of shit that a cracker is trying to get from you. Is they're trying to get things like your jots. So step 1 is like good internet practices, communicating over encrypted lines, that kind of stuff. Step 1. Step 2, we haven't really talked about here, is set an expiration on them in the headers. And so like this token is only good for the next day, and then you need to log in again. Or every time that you do something, we'll issue a new jot that has like another 24 hours. And so as long as you're doing something, you stay logged in. Elsewise, you have to log in again and get a new token. Yeah?
Is that how banks sort of like keep you out of your knowledge?
No, banks use sessions, which is everything that we've been talking about in this auth series is token-based authentication. There's 2 other kinds that are relevant. One is sessions, which are older, and that's exactly what banks do. The big difference there is you're actually keeping track of every user who's logged in a database. And so those records in the database are called sessions. And if you want to log somebody out, you just delete that record. And then when you try to retrieve their session out of the database and it doesn't exist, it goes, oops, you're not logged in. There's like pros and cons to both of them, but token-based authentication scales way fucking better. But there are some downsides. For example, if somebody gets your JWT, they are you. Yikes. The third kind is also a token-based authentication, except your app doesn't issue the token. It's called third-party token-based authentication, which all of you know as social auth. So this is, I will honor any tokens that Facebook issues or Google issues. And so when you want to log in through my site, I'm going to send you right over to Google. You log in there. I never see your login shit. All I know is they issue you a token that I can verify the authenticity of.
So that's, for instance, whenever they have like a username that says sign in with Google, basically.
Exactly.
Is that what OAuth is?
Yes, that's exactly what OAuth is. That is a third trusted party that we both believe can verify who somebody is. You trust that they're not going to steal your shit. Probably you trust them more than you trust me, which is good. And I trust that they are a canonical source on things like what somebody's email address is. So I can use that in place of my own authentication system. Pretty cool.
Then when your JWT gets stolen through whatever website, it's compromised in 2 places.
No, because the JWT that Google issues isn't good for anything but my site. So I do some work with Google up front so that I can verify the tokens that they're issuing, but they're not valid for anything else that uses Google Auth. Cool. So we're talking about issuing signed tokens to users. Let's backtrack. I'm going to get stash. Talk me through it. Let's start the other direction this time. Toby, how am I starting?
We're going to install or bundle add JWT.
Beautiful. And then the thing I forgot, I also need to
Restart your server?
restart the server.
And bundle? Or
No.
do you need to install after?
No, bundle add also installs it.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I've restarted the server. Very nice. Seth, what am I doing next?
Go to your authentication code.
Mm-hmm.
And in our login method,
Mm-hmm.
Under the else if user authenticate,
Mm-hmm.
Brand's password, that's correct, but the next line, secret key, secret underscore key,
Okay.
equals Rails dot application dot secret key base 0.
Good. Very nice. Let's see. Samantha, what am I doing next?
The next one is creating the JWT
Mm-hmm.
data code. And then passing a hash with the user ID and the username.
Sure. It can be anything.
Yeah.
It's not. User.id, and this will be username.
And then the other thing you're going to pass it is that secret key.
Good. Cool. Stacy, what's next?
So you want all that to be assigned to a token.
Good.
And then instead of rendering JSON message token.
Cool. See if it works. So I am logging in with the incorrect shit, unauthorized. I'm logging in with the incorrect shit, unauthorized. I log in with the correct shit, I get a token. Sick. Questions? Yeah, miss.
The secret base, the secret key base, you have 0 because your master key starts with 0?
No, because this is an array and I want the first thing in there.
Oh.
You can have multiple secret keys.
Okay.
There's like different ways to get to that too.
There is.
Because I remember doing something completely different.
It's worth mentioning that this doesn't, it's not a magical thing. We could just as easily do secret key equals fart. It just needs to be something, and Rails happens to automatically generate a super secure one for you.
So where do you store your secret key in Node? Since
Oh, good question. So here, I'm storing it in the environment. I saw there's somebody in like All About Code, this is before you guys were students, who's freaking out about like, don't store secret keys in the environment. To this day, I have no clue what that person was talking about. Your environment is in your terminal. We have all kinds of variables that are just available to us. Shit. Echo. Oh. Well, for example, there's a default editor, and it's stored in. It's stored in a variable. There's also, God, why am I spacing on all the built-in variables? Yeah, probably about 150 or so of these that are just stored in your computer. You can also add your own. So I can say something like student equals mez. Now I can echo $student. Bash is this is a programming language. You can also like issue these commands, but you can also do loops and ifs and all kinds of other wacky shit. It's also a programming language, and that's how we store variables. So those are just out there in your environment. And so in Node and Rails, for that matter, we can read those environment variables. And so like if I pull up, let's see. There we go. So I make a file called .env, and I can store key value pairs in that. And then the way that I use them is with this npm package called dotenv.env. If I run .config, it reads all of that stuff in the file and makes those available in my environment. And then in Node with process.env, I can read any environment variable. Yep.
Is that environment file in your, I guess it's environment, so it's not going to be, like, it's an invisible file, so like GitHub can.
GitHub can, you have to explicitly tell it not to.
So it has to be in your like git ignore.
Yes, exactly. It's like node modules or something. You do not want that like in your repo ever. You can't just put it in there once and then delete it, because Git has your entire history of everything your repo has ever looked like. You push that up to GitHub, you're going to get an email from GitHub going like, oh, you have to change all your shit. I really wish you hadn't done that. Here's a great example. So the way that like with Connects files, we have all these keys here. So I've got one thing that I want to use for development, another thing I want to use for production, and this is some external database URL. Cool. Well, how do I tell Node which one to use when? Environment files. When you like push something up to Heroku, it makes an environment variable called node env and sets it to production. And so you can get that particular key of it or default to something else. That's how you do that.
So we could store our secret key in Rails in an env file instead of doing what Rails gives us.
Correct.
but Rails is secure.
Yep.
More secure.
And the Gem has a package, shocker, it's called .env, because the Node one ripped that one off. That does exactly that. So when I'm bringing somebody new onto the Develop Denver website, I give them the repo, and I said, oh, by the way, here's all the environment variables also. And like I send that in a secure message because they also need that to like actually do anything with the production site. That's the keys to the castle. My repo doesn't have anything special other than like my top secret architectural techniques. But if you want to like access to my database and all that kind of shit, all of that stuff is stored in an env file. That's the secrets. That doesn't go up on GitHub. Ideally, that never goes across a network. Like that's the kind of thing like you move around an org with like thumb drives and shit. Cool. Other questions? All right, last thing we'll do. Your turn. This one's quick. I'm going to do 3 minutes. Give it a go. Git stash.
the hash braces on this, that side. Nope, inside. Nope, right. Good job, thank you.
Don't fuck up again, Jared. Okay, so we can issue signed tokens to users. So we can make new users, we hash their passwords, we take in a username and a password, we hash it and see if it's the same as the one that we stored. Then we wrap up some data in a signed token. What's a signed token? JWT, that's the technology we're using for it. How does the signing part work?
Do you mean the signature
Mhm.
on the token? That's like the encryption that is used on the.
Careful, encryption's different.
Sorry, encoding?
So the token is an encoded bunch of information. How does the signature part of that work? Let's say we didn't encode it at all, with just a bunch of characters. We can still sign it. What's that signature? Where does it come from?
The hash of the header and body.
I hash those things together, and then that goes along with the token. So now I can see whether or not somebody fucked with the token. You change any of that data, the resulting hash would be different. Okay? And then, didn't really get to this one, but it's fairly simple. Authentication is all the stuff we just did. Who are you? All right, cool. I believe it. Samantha. Adam's Adam. Good.
Pilot's men.
Authorization is what is that person allowed to do? So this is like, well, this person can add but not delete. This person can add and delete. This person can create new tables. Well, like permissions, that's authorization.
So that's still being the authentication controller doing authorization stuff?
No, that's a like totally different system. But it hints at what the last part of this series is going to be. All right, cool. Now we have tokens. How do we require those in order to like do actions and stuff? Any questions before we wrap?
So, the only protection in someone not taking our JWT is HTTPS, and that's really it.
And like timeouts and not giving your computer to like suspicious strangers at the airport and that kind of stuff.
Can you show us how people would get the job?
Absolutely. So I'm currently logged into the Flatiron. Wake up. Nobody's been on this server in the last hour? All right. It's waking up the server. And all right, so I'm logged in right now. Well, what does logged in mean? Logged in means if I go over to storage, and I go over to local storage, hey, weird, it's my token. So somebody snags that, throws it over here. Neat. Looks like you're me.
That's easy.
Yeah, wow, okay. So yeah, don't leave your computers. So that's why like all of those scandals about like people leaving their computers in an airport or something and suddenly like a big corporation loses all of its information, that's how it happens.
Literally, that's how it happens.
That's crazy.
Not hard. Like, and another like warning there is that if you, shoot, where is it? Like, if it goes to a user's computer, they have control of it now. Your code, not secret. You can examine source code that somebody sends you. Tokens, this kind of stuff. Don't put anything too private in there because Like if you don't want that user to see something, like how many strikes they have against them or something like that, don't put in a token because they can see it inside the token if they want to. And like likewise, anything that like you sent them that they send back to you, like don't trust it. You need to verify the signature of the tokens because like they could modify them. Just because like well, who would look in the browser tools to like exactly the kind of person you're trying to prevent from doing that? Other questions? Cool, thank you.
I'm going to go see my Facebook token.